Hey guys, welcome into the Bear With Us podcast. He's Frank. I am the guy on the right. Uh, and, man, I'm not in front of Hallis Hall. I'm sorry. I know it's a virtual backdrop, but listen, behind me, we're getting my son's room ready, right? Like we had to move a lot of stuff into this room. We're still getting our house taken care of, and I can see right there that the headphones caused a little bit of a break in the reality. And I apologize for anyone's brains that were messed up with. It's like a continuity thing. Like if one scene, someone's wearing a hat, and then the next scene they're not wearing a hat, you're like, my brain can't process that. But so I apologize, but I'm still gonna do it because
The thing
it works.
I know, like, so here, firstly, let me say, I want to thank everybody who tuned in the last episode.
Yes.
I mean, that's our highest performing episode since since the Bears drafted Justin Fields, and we did our emergency podcast for that with all that excitement. So I think a ton of people are really excited about the draft. But one thing that you have to know about me and Jack, because I mean, we got like an 18 or 20 new subscribers as well. So I'm assuming we're gonna get some newer people to the channel. Our sort of comedy is a little bit different. Jack did that in the beginning with that background to be funny. It's not supposed to look like he's like legitimately in front of Hallis Hall.
No, that's old school. That's old school corked up podcast shit right there, where it was
That's true.
I just haven't had the backdrop. I had it for a couple episodes of the Bear With Us podcast, and then we started working on my son's room, and now and now this room isn't workable anymore. And it's a good room. It's the office in our house. I got a fan up here for when it gets hot, and my dog likes to run around. You'll hear my dog if any new listeners. We've already had to comment on one guy, and I listen. It is what it is. I can't stop him from barking. All right, he's just gonna do it. I can't help it.
We've gotten that comment a couple times. If guy on the right, if you want to be taken serious, shut that fucking dog up.
Listen, there are enough fucking podcasts out there that have the professional setting. Ours is more of a laid back environment, but I do genuinely agree. Agree with Frank. Thank you guys so much for being here, for joining for subscribing. To YouTube. Like I did not expect that episode. We've been kind of plodding along, like 50, 70, which is still great.
Awesome.
And we still genuinely appreciate people who've been around hanging out with us for a while now. But just to see like that episode kind of take off a little bit, just exciting stuff. So hopefully we can kind of continue. I wish it would have happened like during the season, because now we have a bunch of new subscribers, and we're hitting the off season, and might get a little loose in these episodes. But today is a little bit different because we do have some things we want to discuss. We have a couple of reports regarding Justin Fields and Ryan Poles, and just some anonymous sourcing. So take that for what you will. We did think it was interesting enough to talk about. And then there was a ranking of wide receivers, specifically ranking the team's wide receiver groups 1 to 32. And there was some very, very questionable rankings. And Frank and I, if we find a ranking that he and I disagree with, we're absolutely going to spend a lot of time breaking it down and making fun of it, even though ultimately it's one person's opinion and who really cares. At the end of the day, it's just for fun. We're going to have a good time today. And then hopefully next week, we're going to start breaking down our quarterback rankings. It looks like we're probably going to start with the NFC and then finish up with the AFC. So that's some future content to look forward to. But specifically today, Frank, let's go ahead and get started with the comments regarding Justin Fields. According to Jeremy Fowler of ESPN, there were NFL team officials around the league that are skeptical that Bears quarterback Justin Fields can be a successful pocket passer. Frank, what are we doing here? Like, I tweeted it, I retweeted it. I'm going to give you a little breakdown, because two players that have been compared pretty well around the league, fair or not, Jalen Hurts, Justin Fields. In 45 games that Jalen Hurts has played in his career in the NFL, he's been sacked 77 times. 45 games, 77 sacks. In 27 games, Justin Fields has been sacked 91 times. Like, yeah, I can't think of a reason, Frank, that maybe Justin isn't developing in the pocket. I can't figure it out. Can you help me?
Well, Jackie, the offensive line is obviously a big reason. It's a big reason why we were really excited about Darnell Wright and the Nate Davis signing. I mean, the other thing as well is, when and we've talked about the development of Justin Fields, the things that we know he needs to get better at, the things that he has started to get better at and sort of, starting to master. And, one of the biggest things in a young quarterback's sort of trajectory and development is, throwing to what is considered NFL open versus college open, high school wide open. And he's never even had a chance to throw to NFL open receivers. I mean, do you remember the charts that were coming out like week after week last year about the separation that the Bears receivers were getting? It was embarrassingly bad. So, that certainly doesn't help as well. That said, again, I don't want to make it seem like, oh, Justin has no flaws or has nothing to improve on. We've gone on record and talked about some of the things that we'd like to see him improve on. And quite honestly, some of the things that he has improved on, because he has improved on these things. But one of the things is throwing with anticipation. I think a big part of it is the line. Another big part of it is the separation that the receivers get. But then even we talked a lot last year about the trust. Like, you think about that play that he did throw with anticipation to Equanimeous St. Brown at the end of that Packers game. And for whatever reason, that clip has been going around as if that was a bad pass. That was an on-the-money pass to Equanimeous St. Brown, who couldn't time the route correctly. It was like a 17-yard comeback route that, I mean, Justin threw to where the receiver is supposed to be. So it's like he didn't even have that trust factor there. But even without that, there were times when you go through the film and you see just a young quarterback not seeing the field, and that's okay. Like that, like we've seen even Trevor Lawrence last year, who had a phenomenal season, who's starting to excel in the pocket, miss those throws. That's what happens with young receivers. I mean, again, we've tried to almost level set expectations, because it seems like expectations get blown way out of proportion because Patrick Mahomes is Patrick Mahomes, and he just came in year 2 and was like, bam, I'm the best quarterback in the world. That doesn't happen. That usually rarely ever happens. Quarterback development happens very slow to a point where you're using the first 5 years of that rookie deal to really assess whether or not this is your guy. You usually don't know until the end of year 3 or year 4. And everything that we've seen from Justin, problems wise, developmental wise, has been very normal from a developmental standpoint. But the biggest thing that me and you have held on to here is, one, he has progressed passing in the pocket, and 2, we've seen him carry this team on his fucking back, man. For the flaws that he may have and the things he needs to improve on, he, for a stretch at a time last year, carried an elite offense for 7-8 weeks, with nothing around him. So how can you be down on this kid right now? It's just very strange.
It's become just an incredibly lazy narrative at this point to just say Justin Fields can only run with the football. And yes, if you are looking purely at statistics, fine. Yeah, it probably, I see that he's ranked last in a few category, but you also have to look at passing attempts. There was the first 5 or 6 weeks, they were the low, they just didn't pass more than 9 times. And Frank and I were the first people on this podcast yelling at the sky to let Justin throw the ball more. And again, I think it is just Luke Getsy still figuring out his offense and, really kind of figuring out what weapons he has to work with. But there were still plays that Justin Fields can make from the pocket that people probably just don't acknowledge. They don't see it because they're not watching, because the Bears aren't exactly a nationally televised team because of just how their season was going last year. It wasn't, but to just say that he can't make plays in the pocket is just, it's absurd. Now, granted, they weren't saying that he can't do it. They were just saying that they were skeptical that he can become a legitimate threat from the pocket. My rebuttal to that is, does he really need to? Does he really need to be one of the most effective quarterbacks in the league? Eventually, I think he will need to improve his pocket play, and I think that comes with having a better offensive line, a more solidified offensive line, and having legitimate NFL caliber wide receivers to throw to, including his new number 1 target, DJ Moore. makes things a little bit easier for him to make those passes and have those completions. His numbers look a little bit better when they're not bouncing off of Velus Jones' hands when they're literally right in the bucket. Probably helps the numbers a little bit, is all I'm saying.
Yeah, no, and that's why, I mean, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I just don't think Justin Fields is ever going to be Peyton Manning from the pocket, but I don't need him to be. The Bears don't need him to be that. Make use of what makes him special and improve on the things that he needs to work on. But I just don't know how people can confidently, and I guess they're not. They're saying skeptical at best, but I just don't know how you could be skeptical. How can you say you've seen enough from Justin Fields in this offense to just think one way or the other? I just truly don't understand, especially with, again, the amount of sacks that he's taken. The offensive line has been so bad. I don't know how you can even say you're skeptical at this point. I really don't.
Yeah, well, especially, and that's why I lean to the things we've already seen him improve on. We just came off of a generational bust in Mitch Trubisky that he just never improved over 4 years with the Bears, versus someone who is clearly putting in the time, who has the mental capacity and IQ to continue to get better, and he's shown that he's gotten better. The lazy narrative, though, that I do want to attack that you were sort of talking about was he can't throw the ball. It's like when I think of guys who can't throw the ball from the quarterback position, I'm thinking of Tim Tebow, who his mechanics were really bad, who just his throwing motion was awful, accuracy
in the
was
dirt, bouncing balls.
That's what I mean. I mean, even look at what Zach Wilson was doing last year, wide open people in the flat, he's throwing 10 yards over, and sometimes that happens with even great quarterbacks. I get it, but it was consistently happening. Justin, I mean, look at his deep ball. The one thing that we've conceded on as well, he needs to work on the intermediate and the short game. But again, I'd rather have a quarterback that has to work on that than have Derek Carr, who's a dink and dunk guy his whole career, and you have to force him to be aggressive. You know what I mean? We've had these conversations, but people talk as if his throwing mechanics are bad. They talk as if he just doesn't have a good arm. He has the physical talents to get this done. Now it's about getting the reps and getting more comfortable with this offense, and like you said, supporting him with actual NFL talent. But the larger narrative here is what you touched on, and that was my first thought about it, was who is a traditional pocket passer in today's league? Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in the league, and he's not that. Josh Allen is number 2 or 3. He's not that. Joe Burrow, he throws from the pocket a lot, but look at the way he manipulates the pocket. And I would even, wager to say he's an underrated athlete. I've seen him get 3rd and 15s on the ground. He's a very good athlete.
And look at his receivers.
And look at his receivers, right? But Jalen Hurts.
Herbert, I guess I would say Herbert is probably the most.
Herbert
and Tua. Herbert and Tua, I would say, are the two most pocket passing.
And both teams are middling teams.
Yeah.
I mean, if you don't have a dual threat quarterback in today's league, Mac Jones, 8 and 9. Bailey Zappi was probably a little bit more athletic than him. They got a little bit out of the run game with him. Russ, his legs seem to be shot. He's gone. He's a pure pocket passer now. He can't get it done from there. You need, in today's NFL, you need that level of athleticism. I mean, Justin is a step above athletically than most other quarterbacks, but I just mean you need that dual threat. So I don't, just like your point, I don't need him to be Peyton Manning. I just need him to be able to consistently do it from the pocket. And because every single drop back won't be from the pocket. They're going to roll him out, hopefully. They're going to utilize his legs. They're going to RPO. They're going to play action fake. You're going to utilize this weapon that you have. And I just need to, when it is time for a 7-step drop back, a 3-step drop back, which won't be every single time, that you just have to get it done. And again, with his work ethic, and isn't he didn't he test number 2 of all time on that quarterback processing test behind Peyton Manning?
That everybody was freaking out about what Bryce Young did with it.
And they were also freaking out about CJ Stroud's being so low.
Yes. Yes.
So it's you can't have it both ways. You can't freak out about one and not applaud the other for having a high score. So which one are we? Does it matter or does it not? So again, everything he showed us, until he fails, I'm going to continue to have faith in him, because you're talking, anyone who is going to sit here and say you guys are Bears homers, you're just, jumping in Justin Fields' side. Look at our Mitch Trubisky episodes in year 2, in year 3. We weren't saying this about him. We're not just saying this because this is a Bears quarterback. I mean, were we doing the podcast when the year that Glennon was here and Trubisky's rookie? I don't know if we were yet, but me and you were having conversations Glennon is not a good quarterback. We're not just hopping in, because we're Bears fans. I think we have legitimate reasons to have faith in him. And it's also just weird to me, the overarching thing. Like, why are people concerned about the Bears right now? Like, they just won 3 games. This is year 1 of a rebuild after, a teardown last year. Like, why are these anonymous reports happening? It's strange to me.
Because I would say it's because the Bears were relevant for the first time in a while because they had the number 1 pick and they made a pretty groundbreaking trade with the Panthers that kind of set up how the draft would sort of fall. And then they made another questionable decision in people's eyes to trade Jalen Carter for a 4th round pick, even though that's not what happened at all. They weren't going to take, if I see it again, I'm going to freak out. They traded the opportunity to draft someone they weren't going to draft.
Yep.
You know how I know they weren't going to draft him, Frank? Because they would have drafted him if they wanted to draft Jalen Carter. And the way they've talked about it since then, he was never going to be their draft pick at the number 9 overall pick. So what he did was Ryan Poles decided, hey, there's a team that wants this guy that I don't want. They're willing to give up a future asset for me for literally nothing. I don't want this guy. I'm going to trade. I'm going to do that. Like, I don't understand. Yeah, I'm with you. I don't really get why the Bears are even like getting this sort of attention. I just assume it's because they had the number 1 overall pick, and Bears fans are excited. Like I feel like for so long the Bears have been just kind of like, since 2018 they've been like, there's been nothing to really be excited about. And so I feel like people are just used to the Bears just kind of being like whatever team. And now they're kind of putting their foot in the right direction. And people don't like that their fans are excited. That's kind of my rationalization.
Yeah. Jackie, can you just tell me what these teams have in common really quick? I'm just going to rattle off a list of teams. The Carolina Panthers, the Houston Texans, the Arizona Cardinals, the Indianapolis Colts, the Seattle Seahawks, the Detroit Lions, the Las Vegas Raiders, and the Atlanta Falcons. You know what they have in common?
They all could have drafted Jalen Carter.
They all could have drafted Jalen Carter, and none of these reports are coming out. So it's weird to me because this trade down for the 4th rounder seems to be the hang-up. I wonder if the Bears just drafted Darnell Wright at 9 and just passed, without the trade. Would this have been not a non-issue then? Like what? It's just, it's weird. Because again, to your point, they weren't going to draft him anyway, and they got a 4th rounder for their troubles. And the only way, like, if you're a Bears fan, forget the national media, because I'm already annoyed with them. If you're a Bears fan that wanted to draft Jalen Carter, one, I get it. He's super talented. So I understand wanting to get that sort of talent on your defensive line. But with the red flags, I think it was the right move to pass on him. But it doesn't matter how good he winds up being with the Eagles. I'm more concerned about Darnell Wright. If he's a generational right tackle, even if his career isn't as good as Jalen Carter's career, that's all that matters. That's the win. You're supporting your franchise quarterback. That's one of the notions, I think, Jack, that, off season after off season, that if Justin makes those strides, he gets a big contract extension, and we talk about these moves. Those are the moves that are going to be made. You're going to take maybe even like an above average offensive talent over an elite defensive talent. It's situationally dependent, but generally speaking, because you're supporting the guy that is going to win you ball games. Like that's the one thing, Jack, we sometimes forget. Chicago ain't used to having a franchise quarterback, and the times that we may have had one, you think maybe like Jay Cutler, some people were higher on him, they didn't necessarily support these guys like they should have. So we're having a regime that after 2 off seasons seems to get it. Well, at least this off season they really threw pieces around him. That's what it looks like to support your young ascending franchise quarterback.
Right. Yeah, I just don't get the Jalen Carter debacle. I really don't. I just, Chicago fans are just they love having a good defense, and I agree with you. Whatever he does with the Eagles, I'm not concerned with, because it's just such a different. The Eagles normally would not have the 10th overall pick.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's not a normal situation. They had the 10th overall pick and were able, because they're a good organization and have already built a defensive line, a culture that can support someone like Jalen Carter. They can take a risk. They just went to a Super Bowl. The Bears are coming off a season where they won 3 games. Okay, like I'm not concerned about Jalen Carter. Like I really, it's kind of like, and I wanted to talk about this on our last episode. When we were talking about the Bears draft. The Texans kind of did the thing that I really didn't want the Bears to do. And that was, well, what if Will Anderson falls to like 5 or 4 or something like that? Should the Bears trade up? And I was like, no, because I don't think one player at this point is going to make that type of impact to really get this team on the correct track. The Texans basically said, fuck next year's first pick. Granted, they have another first overall pick because of the Deshaun Watson trade, but their pick might be super, super high in the draft. And the Cardinals are sitting pretty right now with a chance to maybe get the first and second overall pick, which would just be insane if it happens. But I didn't want the Bears to do that because I don't think one defensive player at this point is really going to make all that much of a difference down the road. I would much rather, we've talked about this, figure out the offense first and then fill the defense. And bringing in Darnell Wright might help alleviate some of the pocket concerns that people have for Justin Fields' development.
Yeah. Well, and, generally speaking, the reason why I really like the Darnell Wright pick over Jalen Carter, even minus the red flags. Let's make no mistake. Had he had no red flags, he was going top 5 easy. Seattle didn't pass on him. Detroit at 6 doesn't pass on him. The Cardinals may not even trade down. Like, they may just pick him straight up there. Anyway, is because offense is more sustainable year to year than defense. And like, as Bears fans, we should know this. Like, going back to the Urlacher days, they weren't elite every single year. They were elite for a year or two, and then it was like back to fringe top 10. You lose some guys.
Would get hurt, guys would get old.
And even the Khalil Mack 2018, you had that hold to number 1 defense in the league. The very next year, you're back down, to number 8, number 9-ish. But the thing is, that still sounds great. Oh, you're still top 10. That's a huge drop off. Versus like if you're the number 1 offense to the number 8 offense, that's really not that big of a drop off. It's more sustainable. It's more on the same level. Like, you look at these teams around the league now, the number 1 defense. I mean, who was it this past year in the regular season? The Bills, maybe? I don't even know. There weren't that many dominant defenses.
Eagles, maybe.
The Eagles, maybe. I know they had the most sacks, but they give up a lot on the ground. But regardless, like that, look at them and then look at like number 8 or 9. That's a huge difference. It's versus like the number 1 offense, which was probably the Chiefs, versus the number 8. Who was it? Maybe Miami. I mean, that's a comparable.
I think it's even more simple than what you're making it out to be. I think the question is, which would you rather have, of 10 to 15 years of a franchise quarterback, or would you rather have 2 to 3 seasons of what Khalil Mack was in Chicago? Like really, like I think it's that simple.
Yep.
And if they can get the quarterback and support the quarterback and get the wide receivers in place and get the offensive line in place, then you set yourself up to improve your defense and get the defense. I would rather much spend money on the defense like they did this year with the linebacking core than try drafting defense, because I just feel like there's a lot more questions in terms of like fit and stuff like that. I feel like, and I could be completely way off on this, but I feel like defense, there's more of an opportunity to swing and miss. Like, I feel like there's a lot more misses in the first round when it comes to like corners or safeties or anything like that. But I personally would much rather have a franchise quarterback than just keep trying to build defensive lines left and right and trying to replace that. Because then you just get into a situation where you're just constantly churning over your defense and you're not addressing the important issues that can really bring your off. And this is an offensive league. You should be taking advantage of how the rules are structured right now. You should. That's what the good teams do. They take advantage of how these rules operate. Now, we'll have to see if maybe Justin gets a few more calls this year in terms of, when he gets hit in the head, when he's sliding, just getting hit overall. But I feel like they're making the correct decisions. So we'll just have to wait and see.
But you know what? The other thing as well, Jack, and then we can move on after this, is that to me is how you're going to assess Matt Eberflus as a head coach.
Yeah.
Is, you you can pour a ton of resources into a defense and make it become elite for a year or two. And that's oversimplifying because you have to find the right prospects and the right free agent signings. I get that. I'm just, generally speaking, before the people in the comments kill me, it's not that easy to build the defense. I'm not saying that it is. But
it is, though.
I think it's easier too than an offense. But if you pour more resources into the offense and you have average to above average talent on defense, but you have this defensive coach that, philosophically and scheme wise can raise it up, that's where you earn your keep. You're a defensive head coach, right? I think throwing away last year because it was just a dumpster fire teardown year, like that's how I'm going to assess Matt Eberflus this year. Like, can they be situationally good? Can he, him and Alan Williams be more aggressive with linebacker blitzes and things like that? That's how they're going to earn their keep here, because this is an offensive league. But with that, the GM is doing the right thing and investing in this offense. You have to show that schematically your defense can still keep, keep that offense in games. Because again, the Bears should not have only won 3 games last year. It came apart at the end. But all those one-score games because the defense couldn't stop shit, that's not a good thing. And I'm willing to chalk that up as just talent because they were bad, but they did get some pieces in the offseason that they should be better, and Eberflus has to continue to develop these guys.
Well, and that's what that was the point I made last week when, a lot of the focus was on Ryan Poles and his draft class and Justin Fields, where I don't think enough attention was being put on, okay, can Matt Eberflus be the one to develop this? How are his in-game decisions going to be improved? Because I was not happy with Matt Eberflus last year, and that was, before obviously they were in the running for the number 1 overall pick. But just in-game stuff, I didn't like some of the things he was doing. So I think there is a lot to that, and it really kind of reminds me of what happened in Indianapolis with Andrew Luck, Chuck Pagano, and Ryan Grigson. Ryan Grigson, granted, he had one incredible draft class and then just sort of fucking fell off the cliff. That's not Ryan Poles. I don't think that's going to happen. Could. I don't think it will. But Chuck Pagano schematically never did anything that really impressed me. Like, he was a good guy and you wanted to root for him because of his story and what he went through. But as a football coach, there just wasn't enough development happening with the draft picks, the things that needed to really happen to take that team to the next level. I have questions about Matt Eberflus still. Granted, he didn't really have a chance to answer those questions because of what you said. The talent just really wasn't all that good. And honestly, the talent still isn't all that good. Yes, they've made improvements. I agree with you. But that defensive line it's not great. The edge rushers are really not going to fill a lot of confidence in me. There's still some work to be done, but if Eberflus can continue coaching up these guys and get the most out of them, this team will look a lot better.
Yeah. Well, and in terms of judging what next year, what improvement looks like for that defense, again, we sort of touched on this last week. The resources they poured into that defensive line have more to do with stopping the run. So I want to see how well they can do at that, or how much better they can be at that. But again, for me, I don't know if it's an Eberflus thing. I don't know how much control or autonomy he's given to Alan Williams on defense, but I just need them to be a little bit more creative on that side of the ball. It was like there were a few weeks where it was like the blitzes looked brilliant and the stunts looked brilliant, and all of a sudden it just went away and it went back to this bland, like, Mel Tucker cover 2 defense. I'm like, what are we watching right here? So again, I'm willing to throw last year. That to me was a teardown year. It is what it is. I think this year is the year where you really start to assess the coaching staff and what they can and can't do. But just to reiterate, Ryan Poles has done enough for me in these last 2 off seasons with his savviness to earn himself at least like 6 years. To where if Eberflus just shits the bed, I would be okay with him picking another coach. Okay.
I do know that we said some similar things about Ryan Pace back in the day about getting to pick maybe another head coach after he drafted Justin Fields. Well, I don't know if I'm there yet, but I get what you're saying.
That to me, I don't. Well, I think our sentiment was more like, will they give him a chance to develop, be a part of the development of Justin Fields? We were comfortable with him picking another coach when it became Matt Nagy because we knew, because ownership was just fucking idiots. They placed John Fox on him. He didn't pick John Fox. He wanted Quinn. Right. Yeah.
Right. Which kind of made Bears fans skeptical of what happened with Ryan Poles and Matt
Yes,
Eberflus.
very much so. But again, we and for the new people that are here, go back to some earlier episodes around that time. We were pointing to reasons why this did feel different. Like this was the Poles show. He had a lot of leverage in those negotiations, and specifically with Minnesota also having an offer for him. And it was very clear pretty early on that he had a lot of autonomy, like much more than Ryan Pace did early in his tenure. So.
Yeah, and speaking of earlier episodes, it's Gervon, all right? It's Gervon until he sacks Jordan Love, Kirk Cousins, and Jared Goff all in his first 4 games against those divisional teams. 3 games. Excuse me.
But first of all, there has to be confusion somewhere, because I listened to the Around the NFL podcast and they did their like little draft rankings, and they also called him Gervon.
I think it's however you want to say it. I'm just kidding, because I don't want him to get mad at me because he's a big guy. So if he wants it to be Gervon, I'll call him Gervon. But
listen,
I was making a joke, by the way. He doesn't actually have to sack those 3 guys. I would like him to.
Oh, he's going to.
I would like him to.
He's going to.
Okay.
But he's about 6'6", 315.
I want to see him go up against
AJ
Dillon. That's who I want to see him go up against.
Oh, you just
AJ
stuff
Dillon.
the run, just a little swim move right in there.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm excited to see that defensive line. Anyways, Frankie, let's talk a little bit about wide receivers, because the Bears have it's been a while since the Bears have been relevant in the wide receiver game. I'm thinking Brandon Marshall, that squad that they had.
Alshon Jeffrey.
That was Alshon Jeffries, as a lot of Bears fans like to call him. Listen, this list is it's not good. It's not good. By Mike Clay. This is Mike Clay NFL. This is his NFL 2023 wide receiver unit ranks and depth charts. Now listen, this is one man's opinion.
Yes.
But much like the Chris Sims quarterback rankings that come out, we're going to criticize those opinions, because that's what this podcast is all about, baby. Frankie, I don't want to go over the entire list. If you want to go look at it, like I said, it's on Twitter. It's at Mike Clay NFL. Go look at his list if you want to take a look at it for yourself. I don't want to go 1 through 32. I want to pick out the ones that we really disagree with and really kind of talk through why. I would say we could even start at number 2, because I think number 2 has caused some people to question it a little bit. But I think I understand why. But let's do you want to start at number 2?
Yeah, I think that's a good place to start, Jackie. He had the Seattle Seahawks at number 2. And currently their depth chart is DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, who are both phenomenal receivers, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Dwayne Eskridge, who was like a 3rd-round pick and just never right. By
the way, I think it's Njigba. I think we're gonna get a lot of shit for that.
Njigba.
But I've
heard both. Yeah.
I've heard both. But to cover ourselves, let's say both.
Yeah, and then just go back and forth.
I think Eskridge was like a 4th-round pick.
I want to say he was the same draft as DK Metcalf. As a matter of fact, I think they were in the same draft class. And then Derek Young,
one of those guys that people just like fell in love with in the fantasy community. I remember.
I did.
I remember that.
I drafted him in Dynasty, and he did nothing for me.
He sucked.
And it's the thing is, it's not that that's a bad group. That's a good group. It's a very good group. Are you taking that group over Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle? Are you taking that group over AJ Brown and Devontae Smith?
Yeah, I think that's my issue. But here's what I think is happening. I think because again, it's an overall unit ranking. I'm thinking that he's thinking that Jackson Smith-Njigba, that threesome is better than the twosome that the Dolphins and the Eagles have. Because I would agree that Jackson Smith-Njigba is better than Braxton Berrios and Quez Watkins, but I don't think that Tyler Lockett is better than Jalen Waddle or Devontae Smith. So that's kind of where I'm
don't
stuck
think
a little bit.
DK Metcalf is not better than Tyreek Hill or AJ Brown.
No, I would take both of those two over DK Metcalf.
Same. And then, the Eagles have Olamide Zaccheaus. I think he's a very good number 4. I mean, he could probably be number 3. So very underrated. He had some good years with the Falcons. Chosen Robinson stretches the field. Braxton Berrios may not be as good as Najigba, but he had a solid year with the Jets before Zach Wilson came and fucked everything up for every receiver there. I don't even, Jack, as a matter of fact, we're naming other people who I would take over them. I put the Buccaneers. I would take, just as a whole, Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and Russell Gage over DK Metcalf, Lockett. And now, unless Najigba comes in, both of those players come in and are phenomenal right off the bat.
Let's say JSN.
We'll use initials. If JSN just comes in, but again, like how many even? He may be for the first year or two until Tyler Lockett leaves more like a better like on the field than he is fantasy wise or even like stats wise, because I mean, how many, they don't throw the ball that much for all three of them to have 1,000 yards.
And I've got to be honest, from a fantasy perspective, I don't really like how the Seahawks are building their team, because they drafted Charbonnet, but they also have Ken Walker, and then they're like, we're gonna use both of them, and it's like, dude, come on, Pete. What
I mean, but I'm saying, Jackie, I made my own list, and I don't want to go over my own list, but I put the Bucs above the Seahawks.
I'm surprised how low the Bucs. So for full disclosure, the Bucs are sitting at number 8, below teams like the Chargers, the Cardinals, the Cowboys. Listen, I think CeeDee Lamb is a top tier player. I don't know if I like the Cowboys being number 5 though, because Brandon Cooks didn't really do a whole lot last year. I know he was he's a good player, but like he was in an offense all by himself, and he's produced before, and he didn't really do anything.
Yeah, that was Gallup. He was sort of checked out though. I don't blame him.
Yeah, that's fair. And Gallup, I think he's always been a little bit more overrated. I think he kind of reminds me of like a DJ Chark kind of guy, where it's like he has some good games and you're like, damn, this guy's good, but then he kind of disappears and goes quiet. I think that Buccaneers wide receiver group is severely underrated. I
had the Bucs 4 on my list. I put them above a lot of people in front of them.
Give me your 5. What were your top 5?
I had the Bengals, the Dolphins, the Eagles, the Bucs, and the Vikings. Listen, the Vikings, first of all, that's the one that I had a really.
They're dropped to 10.
They dropped to 10,
just so people know.
Like I mean,
below the Raiders.
The Raiders were another one. I had the Raiders really low, Jackie. I had them at like 18. I mean, because Devontae Adams is phenomenal, but Jacoby Myers and Hunter Renfrow are getting it done for you above these. And I have them rated higher than the Bears. I think they're 14 on my list. I have them rated higher than the Bears. It's a good solid receiver group. But you're telling me they're better than, I mean, even like the Commanders I had at 8, Jackie. Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, Curtis Samuel, that's a fucking good receiver group. You give them a better quarterback, that's a very good receiver group. But it's about depth. I'm taking Devontae Adams over a lot of just singular wide receivers. But everything...
Right. And so that's where people were getting a little bit confused with the rankings. But to me, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, and KJ Osborne is much more appealing to me than Devontae Adams, Jacoby Myers, and Hunter Renfrow. It's much more Jefferson, Jordan Addison, KJ Osborne, much more appealing to me than Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, and Quentin Johnston.
But then, so that begs my question, Jackie. First of all, if you're talking about top heavy, if it's just that, Justin Jefferson is the best wide receiver in football, my opinion. But then, do you just have Jordan Addison fucked up? Like, you think he's gonna, like, if the Vikings don't do anything correct, right? They fucking draft receivers, baby. They know what they're doing. I mean, like, you at this point, we were pretty high on Jordan Addison going into that draft, but
he was
that's
my
almost
number
like
1 receiver.
I think about it, I have at number 2. That's cherry on top for a ranking. If the Vikings take them, I mean, what are we doing here? They know what they're doing. I like them as a tandem. I really do. And just like you said, KJ Osborne, I was comfortable with the Vikings passing up on a receiver early because I think he could be a pretty good number 2 receiver, Jackie.
He would be probably our number 2 in Chicago.
I agree. I think he's I think he's better. I think he's better than Darnell and Claypool.
The bar is low. But listen, the Cardinals is the one that throws me off the most. Like, I don't really understand how Nuke and Hollywood and Rondale Moore are above even the Raiders. If I'm being honest with you, if you're going top heavy. Like the Cardinals being number 6. And again, if you want to go take a look at this list in full, I know we're kind of jumping around a little bit, but I'm not sure I understand. Like, I think, okay, here's the most egregious one to me. It's by far the most egregious. Number 12, the Denver Broncos. Like,
I agree.
What the fuck are we doing here with this? I mean, Tim Patrick is coming off a knee injury. He's missed an entire season. They have two very small wide receivers in Marvin Mims and KJ Hamler. Cortland Sutton, I know he's your guy. But, like, Jerry Jeudy, like, he hasn't even had 1,000 yards before. Garrett Wilson is already a better wide receiver than Jerry Jeudy is. Like, it's not even close.
That's not even close. It's not even close. Garrett Wilson is a tier above him, at least.
The Bears should be above the Broncos.
I'm going to say
it right now.
I put the Bears above the Broncos in mine. I'm taking DJ Moore over any of their top three. And Darnell Mooney, I'd probably take Sutton over Mooney, but I'd take Mooney over Jeudy and Patrick. I mean, again, like, I would like to know what the criteria what the criteria was. Was it like just talent? Was it some projection? But my thing is, Sutton and Jeudy were supposed to take this next step for like 3 years now, and I love Sutton,
right.
I really do, but they haven't done that yet. So I don't get how they're. I agree, that was a very egregious one to me as well. I didn't think they should be number 12. That was a bit crazy because even. Can I say on the flip end, Jackie?
Go ahead.
One that was egregious, that was way too low, not too high, was the 49ers. How the fuck were they behind the Broncos? Yeah. One thing, but at 13, I had the Niners at 7, Jack. Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk?
Brandon Ayuk has already had a better season than Jerry Jeudy has as well.
He's a better receiver than Jerry Jeudy.
Yeah.
Everyone gets caught up in this route running, but the thing is, Jack, like, let's look at the people that even were above them. Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, maybe not Tyler Lockett, but Jalen Waddle, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith. These are guys that are better route runners than Jerry Jeudy. People keep talking about this top 5 route runner. I mean, because it looks pretty on tape. You have to, like, complete plays and get open to get catches. Like, yeah, sure, your little shake and bake at the line to get off the fucking press coverage look great. But what does that have to do? What does that do with anything? So does Dante Pettis, but he fucking sucks. No offense, Dante. I'm glad to have you back. But I'm just saying, man, like, what is the criteria of, the praise that he gets?
Yeah.
And he's hurt more times than not.
The other two that I'm like honestly, like, the bottom half of this list, like, okay, so we should probably talk about the one that people are probably tuning into this podcast to hear our thoughts on, and that's number 16, the Chicago Bears. I can't say I disagree that they should be in that middle range. I think you could bump them up, like I was saying, a little bit higher. I think the Jags are a little bit too low, if I'm being honest with you. And like, the Ravens at 18 feels wrong. Like, is Odell Beckham, are people putting how much stock? Because you can't just say, oh, well, Rashad Bateman too. Bateman is talented, but he hasn't been able to stay healthy at all. And to have them have that group over teams like the Saints and the Bills, the Bills are at 20.
That was crazy.
Like, and the Lions at 22 was surprising to me as well.
Jack, wait, can we stick with the Bills really quick?
Stick with the Bills.
Because we talked about the Raiders, and it's very clear that Devontae Adams shot them up that list. If you just insert, like, average, or lower end number 1, like Amari Cooper, if you switch them,
right,
the Raiders are not number 9, right?
Right.
So why the fuck didn't Stephon Diggs do that for the Bills? Because Gabe Davis and Khalil Shakur, to me, are better than Jacoby Myers and Hunter Renfrow. Renfrow is probably better than, not probably, he's better than Khalil Shakur. Gabe Davis, maybe a wash. Maybe you give it to Hunter. But, like, how didn't that have that same effect there? Stephon Diggs has had 1,500-yard seasons before. Like, what are we doing?
And that's where this list kind of threw me off, because if it is top end heavy, like it is for the Raiders, like it is for the Cardinals, like it is for the Cowboys, because they have that group number 5,
right?
Which I think is insane. How are teams like the Lions with Amon-Ra St. Brown and fuck, man, like, I know he's coming off injury, but Cooper Kupp at 24, I mean, that's pretty wild considering what Cooper Kupp was still doing last year before he really got hurt.
I know.
Like I guess I'm just not, because like, listen, I like the Jaguars group, I do, but they don't have that number one receiver like Stephon Diggs, like Amon-Ra St. Brown, like Cooper Kupp. If they did, like they have Calvin Ridley listed as their first wide receiver. I don't know how you can say that at this point. Calvin Ridley just missed an entire season.
Yeah.
And he was hurt the year before. So I like the group. I just don't think, I think you could probably even put the Jaguars down a little bit below some of these teams. Like, and I think the Chiefs are too high at 26. I think they could probably, like, they're above certain teams. How are the Falcons 31? Can we I know that was at the bottom and it shouldn't matter, but like, why are they at 31?
Jackie,
Drake London should push them up.
I felt the exact same way. And again, you're right. These are still like bottom 10, because the bottom 10 sort of stood in the bottom 10 for my list. It was just a different order. But if I had to tier things out, there's no fucking shot that the Giants and the Falcons are in the same tier. The Falcons just having Drake London and Matt Collins look good for the Raiders. He had some moments with the Raiders last year. Granted, this isn't a deep receiving core by any means, but Drake London is better than anything that the Giants have. The Giants have 4 slot receivers, Jack. What the fuck are they going to do on the outside?
Dude.
Like, what is happening? They have Wan'Dale Robinson, phenomenal slot receiver, Sterling Shepard, who plays a little bit on the outside, but is on the smaller end, and Paris Campbell as well is also a slot guy. Isaiah Hodgins is still going to be their X, I think. I'm taking Drake London over that 10 times out of 10. And as a matter of fact, you may as well just put Pitts there as well, because he's not really a tight end. He lined up outside more times than not.
That's what I was surprised. I was surprised that Drake that Pitts wasn't listed there. But I mean, you look at Drake London. I mean, dude, you could. I mean, it takes you a while to get to their, like, just going from the first column of receivers. It takes you a while till you say, yeah, I would take that guy over Drake London. If you skip, I'm probably going to skip the Cooper Kupp thing, because I don't understand how CeeDee Lamb pushes the Cowboys that far ahead while Cooper Kupp is that low. Like, I get it, age, that type of stuff. I understand that. But it just, I don't understand how Calvin Ridley elevates the Jaguars that much, but Cooper Kupp and the Rams are down so far. I don't understand that. I don't get that. And Drake London, let's see. I would take him over Nico Collins.
How obviously. The fuck aren't the Texans dead last? Treylon Burks at least has upside.
I was gonna say, even I don't get that one. I don't get that one at all. I don't. I really don't get that one. But I would take Drake London over Nico Collins. I'd take him over Wan'Dale Robinson. I'd take him over Christian Watson.
Yes.
I'd take him over DJ Chark, obviously. How the fuck are the Panthers so high, by the way?
I had the Panthers
so
29.
High. They're so high. 27. They're at 27. They're still too high.
Bring them down to a number that's not. Bring them down to 40.
Now, hold on. How the fuck are the Patriots at 25? Why are they above the Falcons?
I knocked them down a few slots as well. I knocked them down to 28.
Dude, they suck. They're horrible. It's a horrible receiver group.
It's bad, yeah. I agree.
Like, I don't like this list. It's bothering me the more I look at it. The Ravens at 18. That was the one that and the Broncos, and I would argue the Chargers and the Cowboys.
Listen,
those are the ones that kind of.
I only knocked the Ravens down a couple of slots to 20 on my list because talent-wise and diversity and just building the room, I really like what they have. If Odell can be what he was with the Rams, which is not a sure thing, if Rashad Bateman can stay healthy, I love Zay Flowers going in that draft. I think he's going to be a very good player. Nelson Aguilar as your 4, and maybe Duvernay as your 4, that's a good receiving. But my thing is, it's just the best ability is availability, and there's no availability on this list, really. Well, between your top 2, between Odell and Rashad. Zay, we don't know. And Aguilar, if you're depending on him to be your 1, that's rough. But if he's your 4 or 5, that's a good room that you got. So I wasn't as upset there. I think I was most upset about the Niners, Jack. I don't get how they're 13. And then the Broncos being above them heightened my level of like, what are these rankings? Like Seattle at 2.
You can argue it.
You can argue it. That's what I'm saying. Even though I'm not taking them over Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. That's crazy because those are 2 number 1 receivers. DK is a number one. Tyler Lockett, I love him. I think he's phenomenal. He's not a number one. He's just not. He's a good number. He's a very good number two. But I don't see how you make the argument for San Francisco being behind some of these guys. We talked about it. The Raiders, the Chargers. I don't think we talked enough about the Chargers. I mean, Keenan is getting old. Mike Williams is so hot and cold. We have no idea what Quentin Johnston is, but I do like Josh Palmer and Jalen Guyton as rounding out that room. Those are good 4 and 5s to have.
I just think 7 for the Chargers is over teams like the Buccaneers, over the Vikings. Yeah, I just don't understand that. Jackie, I don't get that.
I did, because let's dig into the Bears before we wrap this episode up. But before we get there, really quick, when I asked, does this person or people who agree with these rankings have Jordan Addison fucked up because you have Minnesota at 10 when you have the best receiver in the league on your team? Do we have Hollywood Brown fucked up? Because the reason why I look so low on the Cardinals, one, is because DeAndre Hopkins is aging, but he still looks good. He still looked very good last year when he played. I just am not all that high on Hollywood Brown. He went for the first, and that was kind of mind-boggling to me. I don't know, just seeing him on the field, nothing he's a solid receiver, solid number 2, has good speed, but nothing is wow, Hollywood Brown.
I think as an owner who has him on his dynasty team, what I will say about Marquise Hollywood Brown, one thing he does very well is he just catches almost everything thrown his way when the volume is there. And strictly speaking, from a dynasty, a fantasy perspective, he's a very, very efficient wide receiver when it comes to just points total. The amount of receptions he was having while DeAndre Hopkins was out was really pretty impressive. And I think Rondale Moore kind of came along a little bit, but of course he got hurt, which has always kind of been his thing. I like Hollywood more than your average fan. But that being said,
so I have him fucked up. You don't.
You kind of, yeah, absolutely. I think Hollywood would be a good number 2 on the. I think he'd be the Bears' number 2. I don't think there's a question about that. Something
in my head. I know I haven't looked at their stats, but I feel in my heart he's been a little bit more productive than Darnell Mooney. But what is different about them outside of just being in a better offense?
That's the thing. And that's the thing. It might not be that there is a huge difference between them, but I mean, again, you look at the amount of targets just within the early weeks, because last year he finished with 702 yards, but he did miss. I think it was
6 games, 4, 5, 6.
Yeah, he missed 5 games in total, but his first he had 14 catches in week 3 against the Rams for 140 yards. The target, I'm going to read you his targets real quick before he got hurt. 6 in week 1, 11 in week 2, 17 in week 3, 11, 10, 9, hurt. And then that number kind of went down a little bit, 8, 8, 8, 6, 9. And that's when Nuke was back. So when he gets targets, he can be effective. But if your main thing is you need to be getting that level of targets to be effective as a wide receiver, maybe that's not all that good. However, you could just watching those Cardinals games, again, the only reason I is because I have him on the dynasty team, is he was just open. He would just be open on every single play. So I think that really does help for him. I don't know if he's not necessarily the flashy player, which is kind of funny given his name, Hollywood, but I would say Darnell Mooney has probably made more highlight reel play catches than he has.
I think you're right. Yeah, I think you're right. But speaking of Mooney, I think we can end the episode talking about the Bears. What I want to do, because I don't feel any differently than you. I think 16, middle of the pack. You can argue maybe up a little bit, but I did want to. Let's talk. I think just general feelings, because this is it. This is the wide receiver room. They may make a cut at the back end, but it's DJ Moore, Chase Claypool, Darnell Mooney. He forgot to put Tyler Scott on the list, but Tyler Scott is there.
I think he did wide receivers 1 through 5.
But Tyler Scott's certainly higher than Equanimeous St. Brown.
I see. I disagree.
Or Velus, both of them. I think he's had both.
I'd bump Velus off. Put
absolutely.
Tyler Scott there because again, EQ. Their thing, they love him because he can block.
Yep.
They love him
and he's a good special teams gunner.
And he's a good special teams gunner.
But I did want to let's just say this list was, let's just go based on this list, not where we, I maybe have put people above and people behind. Let's talk about it, Jackie. Can we squint our eyes and say that the Bears have a top 10 group? Let's look above. Jacksonville is right above the Bears on that list. I think you can squint. DJ Moore is better than both Calvin Ridley and Christian Kirk individually.
Yes.
Chase Claypool. Darnell Mooney is the number 2. I'm not comparing Chase Claypool to these guys. Darnell Mooney, I don't think is better than either.
Yeah, I would take Christian Kirk over Darnell Mooney in the slot any day of the week. I
would take Calvin Ridley above him as well.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So maybe it's a walk. Does DJ Moore make up for it? All right, let's just put them above. They're above the Jaguars. Okay. The Jets, I don't think there's a shot because Garrett Wilson's better than DJ Moore.
But I think the Jets should be higher because of Garrett Wilson.
Right.
So you push them both up.
You push. Okay. The Niners, you already know how I feel about that. I would take Debo. I would take Debo and Ayuk.
Give me the Bears wide receiver group over the Broncos any day of the week.
I will debate. We can have an orange and blue fight against Broncos fans. Let's set up the boxing card because I'll die on that hill. DJ is better than both Jerry Jeudy and Courtland Sutton. Darnell Mooney, I don't think he's better than Sutton skill-wise, but he's better than Jerry Jeudy. Maybe not necessarily skill-wise there, but he's been more
productive.
Yeah, well, that's true as well. I'm not taking the Bears over the Commanders. I like Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson a lot. And Curtis Samuel being the Velus Jones role.
Yeah. I was going to say, I would maybe take DJ Moore over Terry McLaurin.
Oh, that's a good debate.
But I am not taking Chase or Darnell
the over duo, right? Like you
Dotson.
Yeah. You could probably even say DJ Moore and Terry McLaurin are a wash, but Jahan Dotson clears Claypool and Mooney, I think.
And then Curtis Samuel clears their back end.
Everybody else, unless Tyler Scott comes in and but again, maybe we ended with this, Jack, because I don't think you can even squint and make them top 10. I think you can maybe push them to 13, 12 if you're being generous, right?
It's just how you feel about DJ Moore.
I don't even think it's that. I don't think it's that, Jack, because even if he comes in and he sticks with that 1,100 yards, that's phenomenal. That's great. I think the X factor here in pushing them up is Chase Claypool. I think we've seen enough between Darnell Mooney that when he was the number 1, we were a little disappointed from the offseason. We have a whole shorts on that, and we talked about it in certain episodes. But we think he's done enough to show that he's a good number 2. I think he's a really good number 2 to have. Chase Claypool, man, he's got to show us that he's like a 2B or even just flat out take targets from Darnell Mooney. And there's just something, I hate, Jack, that Steelers fans were right. And they weren't being mean about it. They weren't like, oh, we fleeced you. They were just like, damn, you guys really gave us a 2nd round pick for this guy? And like, they're like, they were like, his issue is he doesn't always use his size to his advantage. He's a 6'2" or 6'3", whatever he is, 230, 240, however much he weighs, that plays like he's Hollywood Brown size. Like, he doesn't use his body. He doesn't win jump balls. It's like, it's this weird dynamic. It's like a puppy that didn't, that doesn't know how big he is, where they still want to jump on your lap and shit. Like that was the analogy that I've seen Steelers fans use. And they were right. I mean, we saw that last year of him like fading away, trying to catch jump balls and like not boxing out in certain, I don't know, he's a very weird player.
Let me ask you a question. Because I think the hate towards Chase Claypool has kind of gotten to a boiling, like to a point that just I don't really understand. It's not like he's never been productive in the NFL. Like I'm not quite sure I'm in agreement that Chase Claypool is some bum.
Oh no,
now,
I agree.
The Steelers had bad quarterback play, and that probably affected a lot of what was going on there. But when he was playing with Ben, he caught touchdowns. That's all he did. And that's that. Like I just don't agree that I think Chase Claypool is going to be a wide receiver 1 in the NFL. No, I don't. I think he's going to be very effective in this offense. I think he can be a really good fit. We'll have to wait and see. But this is the question I want to ask, Frank, because they're right. That name is literally right below, and it's playing an optical illusion on me. The Steelers are at 17, which I think is maybe a little too high over like the Saints and the Bills and the Browns and the Lions and maybe the Colts.
Well, the Bills for sure. The Browns is an argument. I don't know. The Saints, if you guarantee me Michael Thomas is healthy, the Saints would be top 10 for me.
I agree. I see, and that's kind of the Chris Olave stuff. Like, it's interesting that Garrett Wilson can elevate that Jets group to 14, but Olave can't elevate that Saints group a little bit higher.
I get what you're saying, Jack, but let's just say in the vein that we know, just for the sake of argument, that we know Michael Thomas can never play more than like 5 games a year. I'm taking the Jets. I'm taking Allen Lazard over everyone else behind Michael Thomas on that Saints roster.
I liked Garrett Wilson coming out of the draft more than Chris Olave, but I think you could maybe argue that the Saints probably should be a little bit ahead of some of these teams they're a little below. But ultimately, point is, I see George Pickens. I see him. Mm-hmm. And I want to believe that DJ Moore, George Pickens, Darnell Mooney, give me that. How high does that elevate them? In your assessment, are they still below some of those other? Is George Pickens above Jahan Dotson?
No. Dotson's above Pickens, but I would be much more comfortable putting him above the Jaguars. Pickens. The thing with Pickens is he was more of a highlight machine last year. He was a little inconsistent. He's a rookie, but I mean, just skill wise, if he puts it together, he's a better receiver than Claypool. Claypool, I do feel like that the ceiling, he hit it. You know what I mean?
The reason I ask is just because obviously for those of us who are just joining, go check out our many episodes of complaints about Ryan Poles drafting corners and nickel corners and outside corners. And, shout out to the person who made the comment. I'm sorry, I don't have your name. I apologize. But someone posted and saying that Eberflus was a cornerback coach, and maybe that's just why they keep drafting corners. And that was a great point and something I hadn't really considered all that much. So good on you for calling that out. That was great. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna find that name so I can shout them out. Frank, you fill up the air. You fill up the gaps.
Will do. But just like you said, everyone was waiting to see what we had to say about the Bears. And it was funny because when we were messaging about this list, about like what we were going to say and sort of who we think is too high and too low, I was sort of bitter from a content creation standpoint because I was like, I'm not mad at the Bears being middle of the pack. That's just about where they are for me. Like, I wish I was more upset of like, I almost wish he put the Bears at like 20 so I can be like, fuck that. They're better than this team. But like, I was like, that's cool. Like 15, 16. Again, I can squint and put them 13. I think in my rankings, I had them at 15 instead of 16. So, I mean, they're middle of the pack. But again, if I would have really had more time to tier out, like this team is here because they're capped out, but this team is here maybe a little bit lower, but they have the upside to move up. The Bears would be on that list of teams that have the upside to be higher. If DJ Moore can take another step a la AJ Brown with Jalen Hurts, and Darnell Mooney can stay healthy and show that he's that real number 2 guy, and then either Tyler Scott or Chase Claypool like do something, like this group has a real shot to elevate themselves to fringe top 10. But again, that's just going to take these guys to step up, because I'm not predicting an AJ Brown type of step for DJ Moore, but I do think he's going to take one. I think he's been held back due to quarterback play in Carolina.
Yeah. R.Will was the name of the person with the comment regarding Matt Eberflus. So thank you, guys, and thank you to all the comments. Even the one I at the beginning I gave a little, little razz into. I just love the interaction. I love this podcast. I think we have a really fun time. I'm glad other people seem to think so. We're up to just about 122 subscribers, which again, listen. Frank and I are not sitting here like, here we go, we fucking made it, Yeah. But just the fact that anybody spends any amount of time listening to the two of us babble on about the NFL, about the Bears, just in general, is just a really cool feeling, and we really appreciate anybody who spends their time in life choosing to listen to us talk about whatever it is that we talk about. we really appreciate the support. Please continue doing so. Feel free to share our podcast with your friends, with anyone you think might enjoy or maybe not enjoy. You know, we're not afraid of Packers fans and Vikings fans and Lions fans coming into these comments and having some words because, listen, when we do these NFC quarterback rankings, might be some surprises.
Which might be next week.
Might be
depending
next week.
on what pops up, what happens. But listen, there's 16 starters in the NFC. Don't be surprised if Jordan Love is number 20.
Yeah. Oh, we made the same fucking joke. That's great. That's why this podcast is awesome. We appreciate you guys listening as always. This has been the Bear With Us podcast. I'm Jack. He's Frank. We really appreciate the support. Feel free to, listen on Spotify, continue listening on YouTube, throwing us likes, subscribes, all of that good stuff that people always say after they wrap up an episode. Frankie, we'll talk to you next week, man.
Later, Jackie. Later, everybody.